Hello everyone and welcome to 2024, first video of the year. And today we're going to be doing something that's just crappy. Today we have to tune a WRX with the wrong engine. Please stop doing this to me. What do I mean by the wrong engine? I mean, it's got a front mount, that's a good sign. It's got some decent looking parts. I mean, it looks like a normal Subaru. Got kind of a engine janky intake, not my favorite, but it works. Got a fake Turbo Smart blow-off valve, definitely not a real one. I don't recommend that, but it is what it is. So what's the big deal? We've got a pair-in boost controller just kind of flopping in here. Not ideal, but I guess it works. So why am I saying that this is the wrong engine? Looks like a WRX, looks like a Subaru, right? Well, let me show you. Luckily, this doesn't have a bumper, so I can show you a little easier. So this is a 2013 Subaru WRX. US development market, domestic market. And what you see there is exhaust cam AVCS solenoid and sensor. Well, these cars didn't come with this from the factory. In fact, we never saw a WRX in the US until 2015, which was a totally different engine that had dual variable cam timing. Well, dual variable cam timing is kind of cool in the STI model. Gives you a lot more control over power delivery, startup EGR, things like that. But this engine doesn't have, I guess this body, this chassis, wiring, everything, doesn't have provisions to control that exhaust variable cam timing. On top of that, this engine is not a 2.5 liter, which is what the factory was. Not sure if I'll be able to see it down there for you or not, with all this stuff that's in the way, but if we can get a shot, so we can move some stuff there. No, it's not gonna be able to see it, but anyway, there it is, EJ20. So it's 2 liter. What this is the EJ20X. It's my least favorite Subaru engine that I see all the time in cars. And I'm gonna go through why it's my least favorite engine. The many reasons. The reason it's in here is because it's cheap. That's it. That's the only reason people put this engine in. I'll hear excuses occasionally on why someone did it other than just cost. But honestly, it's just an excuse because this engine does not perform, it does not make power, and frankly, it's a total waste of time. Okay, let's go over the modifications on this real quick before we get into tuning it. It is a 2013 WRX on a mass airflow meter tune. It has a manual transmission, which all the 2013s did. It has ID 1000 injectors. They actually look like 1050s to me. Really important when you tell your tuner what injectors you have. You get correct data. So they have the red cap, definitely means they're 1050s. So that's interesting thing I need to note. Stock map sensor, the air temp sensor is part of the math. It has this engine intake. It has a full turbo back exhaust. You can see the downpipe there, clear out the back. It is that EJ20X motor. It is a stock VF52 turbo. It has a front mount intercooler. It looks like an older Turbo Excess model. Hard to say exactly, but it should work just fine. It has this fake Turbo Smart blow-off valve. Something I did want to show on this. You can see in the hole here, there's like a little half divider. See how it's on the bottom on that side? On this side, it's on the top. What that means is if this was plumbed to 50-50 like it's designed to be, you would actually be backwards. So the having that little bottom part means that as the valve opens, it's going to go out this side first and then out that side if the valve is all the way open. The reason why on the actual Turbo Smarts they did it that way on the 50/50 valve was so that when the valve starts to blow off, if you're just part throttle, a little bit of vacuum from maybe like 1 or 2 pounds of boost, it's not going to open all the way, and therefore it's not going to become an air leak because it's going to go back into your inlet like it's supposed to. But this being the Chinese valve is flipped. So even if you rotated this all the way around and then flipped the fittings and then ran the line, it looks like it probably wouldn't fit great, but maybe it would, I don't know. Anyway, stay away from knockoffs, just in general. This will probably be okay for what we're doing. Make sure that it's tightened all the way down, especially because it's atmosphere. But if we run into problems, we may have to take this off and put a stock one on it, and then put the recirc hose back on or do something else. Other than that, the car is pretty stock. It has some suspension, some wheels. It is stock computer, and we will be tuning this through ECU Flash and open source tools. We start by reading the file, and I know who tuned this, so we're basically going to take the file we read off this car and throw it in the garbage. Not that it's going to really be even modified from stock. It's probably just going to have, you know, big fat boost targets and a whole bunch of ignition timing and stock basically everything else. So let's see. Okay, saved, reopen, let's see. Big fat boost targets, 19 pounds. Well, that's not too crazy. At least he's tapering a little bit towards red line. Did some weird stuff with the axes. Let's see, boost control. Not looking too bad. Looks like he might have upped his game a little bit. But let's see things like, let's say cam control. I'm not here to trash on other tuners, but this guy just needs to stop. Oh yeah, that's stock. That's a stock AVCS map. So stock AVCS maps on a car that's not stock AVCS. Oh, look what he did though. He actually took right here and just zeroed all the AVCS out of the startup and tip-in area. Interesting. I wonder why he did that. I bet I know. Apparently this is a 14, not a 13, so that's also wrong on my sheet. But I just went ahead and pulled up a stock map, and we're just going to tune this with a stock map and go from there. We're not going to go through the tuning process exactly on this video, just don't have time today to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and get a base map onto the car so we can start it up with these 1050X injectors. Oh yeah, I'm curious. How did he scale the 1050Xs? Let's see here. Fuel, fuel, fuel. Oops, went too far. Fueling, injector latency. I can't remember if that's correct or not. He did scale in his 1050s, and then per pulse width, no compensations at all for low pulse width. Let's see if there's any low pulse width on this map. I don't believe so. No. So no low pulse width compensations, which is definitely not ideal. These injectors are require some pretty heavy low pulse width compensation. My guess is, let's see, in the MAF comp, nope. Load comp all zeroed. MAF scaling, I bet this number here is really low. Let's check it out. Stock MAF scaling. Let's go down there and just see if he scaled for low pulse width comp using the MAF scaling, which is my guess. Yeah, so this is stock. This is the tune that was on it, and you can see up here where the car normally runs about 1.29. He's at 331 instead of 410. This is factory, and this intake that's on the car is either stock size or maybe just a little bit bigger. So the fact that he's running less airflow there just means it's going to understate the airflow at idle, which can cause some pretty weird issues. Let's see, when we come out to the top of the tune here, or top of the MAF scaling, yeah, so then you can see at the top he's running more airflow, which is probably what I would expect. A little bit more airflow at the top, although he's running a lot more out the top for this engine intake, which also doesn't really look right. So a lot of things that just don't look right. So yeah, we're gonna tune this thing and get it running correctly. It does have a wideband, so we'll see how this compares to the dyno, what the dyno is gonna log. And you know, this is what they would have been tuning it with on the street, the previous tuner, but since we're on the dyno, we can actually log things correctly. All right, right in that base map, I'm gonna get it started up and see what happens. And fire in the hole. Starts up pretty good for just a base map. Just scaled for the injectors and other parts. Come over here to our logger. Atmospheric pressure is reading low, which is interesting. Not really sure what would cause that, but it's reading about a pound lower than I would expect. I'm going to guess that it has something to do with the fact that the customer or previous person modified some of the emission systems on the car, which may have an impact on the atmospheric pressure sensor, specifically the fact that this pressure sensor is actually part of the air pump system on the vehicle. So anyway, we're not going to get into that today, but let me go ahead and get some of my monitors open that I need to log. Looks like we got AVCS logged, intake air temp, fuel pump duty, injector pulse width, etc., etc. Look how close our fuel trim is for a base map. And this is on the stock MAF scaling. So previously, the previous tune had a very heavily modified mass airflow scaling in order to try to get the fuel trims correct, because they didn't understand how to scale injectors correctly. And that's a big problem in my mind. Like, I don't mind other tuners and people doing things a different way, but the car has a fuel model and an air model. And when you scale your injectors by modifying your air model, you're doing it wrong. That's just what it is. If there was no other way, then sure, that's what you have to do. But there is another way to scale injectors on these cars correctly without having to influence the mass airflow meter calibration. So anyway, that's the end of my rant. Be careful who you take your car to for a tune, just because you don't know what they're going to do. If they're scaling the air model for fuel, that's going to affect all kinds of other things. So anyway, I'm just going to get my loggers all set up, and I'm going to go ahead and do a base pull, and then I'm going to show you how sad the base pull is, not because of the previous tuner, but because of the configuration of parts that are on the car. Funny looking graph, really low power, low boost right now. We're only at wastegate default, which by 4700 was only about 9.5 pounds. But for a whopping 138 horse, it went a little bit rich down. But actually, it's about where we want to be, low 11s. My wideband read actually high 10s. These typically seem to read a little bit richer than what I'm reading here, which is fine. I'd rather that my tailpipe wideband, being that there may be influences to it, specifically Venturi effects with any sort of exhaust leak, because it's clear back at the tailpipe. A Venturi effect will bring fresh air in, which will typically make my reading a little bit leaner. So if I tune conservatively on this reading, that means it's a little bit more conservative on the actual car. High 10s is totally fine on one of these Subarus. They actually kind of like being a little on the rich side. But that being said, and by the way, my fuel target in the tune file is 11.2, so we're pretty close as far as tune target to actual. But yeah, there's no power in this thing at all. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of boost. I'm going to do another pull, and basically I'm going to run about 14 pounds and try to get it as smooth as possible, and then we'll go through some stuff before we add a little bit more boost to try to up the actual horsepower number. But yeah, it's going to be sad. Dialed in and had a big misfire at about 5300. We come to the data log and we look and see where the misfire was. This is just EJ20X doing EJ20X stuff. So the misfire hit on cylinder number 1 because we have a roughness count. So what we're going to do is swap the coil pack from cylinder 1 to cylinder 3 and inspect the spark plug gap on cylinder 1 and just see what it's at, and see if the misfire persists or goes away. So I was looking through the log, and I hadn't really done a lot of log, really deep diving into the log until this last pull with the misfire. But I did notice that my AVCS advance left and right are not really doing anything. They're just sitting here at 26 degrees advanced and 20 degrees in the other one. Now, according to the table, they should have dropped out already down towards 0. So I might have to do some AVCS diagnostics as well, and that could actually be the cause of my misfire. So interesting. Now, I mentioned that there was a bunch of problems with 20X motors. Well, and then I showed you that the fact that it's missing the exhaust AVCS components as far as wiring harness on this car to run the exhaust AVCS on the EJ20X. So, one thing that we have to look at here is any of the AVCS on this motor working? So as I was inspecting the spark plugs when I went ahead and did the round robin switch on the coil packs, I discovered that the car had these short reach BKR plugs in it. BKR 7s, so temp 7 short plug. Now this is the correct plug for a EJ205 USDM 2-liter, and this is an EJ20X JDM dual AVCS 2-liter. This would also be the correct plug for JDM like version 7, version 8, STI single AVCS motors, but not the dual AVCS engine. And because of that, what happens is the plug is in the cylinder head, but there's about that much cylinder head, about that much left on it. So let me show you what the two look like next to each other. So there you go. You can see it's about a ½ inch longer on the correct plug versus the plug that was in the car. So got those in it, and we're gonna go ahead and do another pull and see if this thing's a little bit happier. It's gonna be baby steps with this. And that's how these 20Xs typically go. Just little things. You gotta do 20 or 30 little things to get them running okay. And again, they never run great, but they'll run okay. Gonna come over here into better light so I can show you this too. This was the coil pack that came out. You probably can't see it, but the little tab right there is broken, so the connector on the harness of the car will never fully seat. And this is just one I had that's this is a generic coil pack, but you can kind of see that little tab has a little plastic piece right there. And those were broken actually on 3 of the coil packs on this car, which is problematic. So I went ahead, I actually replaced 1 coil pack, and then when I found the other 2, I just went ahead and zip tied the connectors for now, and we'll see if the customer wants to replace those later. But replacing 3 coil packs is a little bit expensive, so we'll see what they want to do. Started up this morning and have a couple of cam codes and a MAF sensor code. I believe the MAF sensor code was from
being unplugged while I was working on it, but the cam codes are not surprising considering what I was seeing the other day. So we're gonna see if we can tune around those, see if the cams come back in at some point, but odds are good we're not gonna have cam control on this motor, which again, EJ20X problems. Okay, let's see what happens here. Doing something, but I don't think it's doing what we want it to do. So we'll see what happens after a pull. One thing that's nice about data logging on these newer cars, they give you individual cylinder misfire monitors, and you can see we had a cylinder misfire on cylinder 2, and I can pull open the data log and actually see that. But yeah, that cylinder 2 misfire, sorry, my focus is not great for some reason. But yeah, cylinder 2 misfire, I didn't replace the coil pack in cylinder 2, did replace the spark plug in cylinder 2. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put a different coil pack in cylinder 2. That was one of the ones that had a bad tab. So it's just zip tied right now. I'm going to replace it. I did 2 pulls, and both pull it consistently misfired at the same RPM. So I'm going to replace that coil. I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to fix anything. You can see my VVT right and left is still stuck at advanced. There's a good chance something's up with the cam timing on this car, which is what's causing the VVT to be stuck, or there's just something else wrong with the VVT system. Yeah, EJ20X, gotta love it. Good news on that pull, no misfires, no knock either. This thing was wanting to do that like tip-in knock that happens sometimes on these cars. Typically that's from loose components, but I always like to kind of move some numbers around to make sure it's not actual knock. But that pull looked pretty good. Went up to 6,200 RPMs. Where's my? There you go. 61, 64. Going to see. The air fuel was a little bit lean up top, so we're going to add a little bit of fuel and try to get it dialed in now. I'm assuming my problem is fixed, but we will see. Still not getting cams to come in, so we may have to disable those just for the sake of getting this car delivered to the customer and let them know, hey, your 2-liter that supposedly is just as good as a 2.5 because it has better AVCS, does not have better AVCS, and in fact is just slow. So yeah, 20X. I'm gonna keep giving you the thumbs up on the 20X thing. These are just not good. So I'm gonna continue tuning this and hope to come up with a good number. That last pull was 257 horse, so not terrible. That's at wastegate default, but we'll see what happens when we try to give it a little bit more boost and see what it'll do for timing. see where we ended up. Looks like 284.2 horsepower and 248 foot-pounds of torque. This graph looks like a typical 2-liter with a VF turbo. So, you know, peaked about 19, actually about 18 and a half pounds. The dyno reads just a hair high. Yeah, not spectacular. Definitely not what you would make on this exact same car with an EJ255. Yeah, we can come into the log and see everything was pretty zesty, no knock. Yeah, I mean, realistically, timing comes up. We're seeing a decent amount of timing up top. Normal low timing on the spool. AVCS is still not working. If AVCS was working, you wouldn't really see any more peak power, but you would see a little more torque in a quicker spool up for sure. So, you know, in the future, if this was working correctly, you know, you might see 265, 280 maybe foot-pounds of torque, and then probably the same 285 horse. So yeah, you know, this whole video has just been about how awful the EJ20X is, and this is what I would consider a good one. You know, this is one that is doing better than most. We actually completed a tune, only had to turn off the variable cam timing. I do have a weird wonky, this is my my fuel trim. Once I come out of boost and even at idle, the sensor is switching. So you're seeing it go like plus 20, minus 20, plus 20, minus 20. And that's probably because the AVCS isn't working. So I'm gonna have to do something about that. Sometimes it's a bad sensor. I ended up having to replace 3 coil packs on this car. Yeah, 3. Not just for bad connectors. The first one may have actually been okay because it turned out that the spark plugs were wrong, but after we replaced the spark plugs, I had to replace coil pack number 2 and coil pack number 4 in order to get it to do a full pull. Luckily, it was just coil packs and not something like cam triggers or whatever. So anyway, it's been a process, but it's done now. Okay, fun little comparison. The EJ20X was in the blue graph here, and there's a red graph behind it, and the red graph is for the red car. This is a 2009, but otherwise it is fairly comparably equipped. It has a top mount instead of a front mount, but otherwise intake, exhaust, etc. So this one has a 255 factory engine, and it's making a whopping 296 horsepower and 329 foot-pounds of torque with less boost. Little bit, about a pound less boost, and it tapers off more up top, but yet it still carries power. And even though up here at 6,400 we're almost 2 pounds less, we're still making similar power. Now this car I didn't rev out to 7,000 just because it's being tuned for a dealership, so it's pretty conservative, but still 255 for the win, 20X for the lose. I mean, look at this right here. Look at this torque difference. We are 144 foot-pounds versus 329 foot-pounds. Like, that's just absurd. And that's what you're gonna feel when you're driving the car. So this car, big thumbs up. 20X car, big thumbs down.